Hi, everybody. This is Paul Hitchcock. I'm the founder and president of Giant Jacks Media. This is my channel, Giant TV, where I have incredible entrepreneurs doing amazing things. And certainly Kimberly Layne Roberts and AmyK Hutchens are two of them. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Hello, and we're glad to be chatting with everybody here.
Yeah, this is great. And I've known both of you for a while. And I want to get into this because I want to first introduce you, Kimberly. And you are a Vistage chair, an entrepreneur, a trusted executive coach in Marin County, the Bay Area, my neck of the woods. Amy K, you are many things, a best-selling author, international speaker, executive coach to business owners. So let's jump into this. I want to start with you, Kimberly, and just a little bit about your background and what you're doing.
Great. Background is I worked for Fortune 100 companies in the past, such as United Healthcare, GE, Genpact, Boston Scientific, mainly in the healthcare space as a top executive. And then in 2018, unfortunately, was like many of us in our journey of careers, we get laid off at one point, as with the startup at the time. And then I decided to start my own business. I too wrote a book called Connections Change Everything, which sits right behind me. You can find that on Amazon. And through that journey, which was not a direct straight line, but just trying different things. And of course, COVID hit when the book was published. So I found myself then becoming an executive coach, starting my company Performance Leadership International. And then through that journey, I became exposed to Vistage and then was asked to become a Vistage chair here in the Bay Area. And I agreed to do so primarily with the purpose of supporting founders and entrepreneurs, not just CEOs. My group specifically is for founders and entrepreneurs because they are the chief everything officer, if you will. And I think their issues are more challenging because they're founders, because they're running their own business than maybe an appointed CEO.
Yeah, wonderful. And you're getting your group together. You meet monthly, and
Correct.
then you have the one-to-ones.
Yeah, we meet monthly in person, the third Friday of every month, and then everybody gets 2 hours of coaching with me, whatever works for them. It can be in person over Zoom or hour and a half, an hour every other week, whatever works. But
Yeah, love it. And I know Vistage well. And Amy K, I know we're going to get into this because you were a Vistage member and have been involved over the years in Vistage speaking. And what we're talking about here today, title is Practical Communication Strategies for CEOs and Business Owners. And I know you often say great companies are built on great conversation. So, Amy K, can we get into a bit about what you're doing and the focus of what we're talking about today? Yeah.
Well, I think one of the fundamental things that you and I have always talked about, going back, especially with Vistage for over 25 years, is that life happens one conversation at a time. And some of the most important and most critical conversations, and Kimberly and I are so aligned on this, are the ones that you have with yourself. And so when you are an entrepreneur, when you are a founder, one of the first internal conversations that you're having is that mental loop of it's so lonely at the top. I have to do this by
Yeah.
myself. And so Vistage solves that problem right out of the gate. So if you're a member in Kimberly's group, if you're saying, okay, look, the first conversation that I need to have with myself is I need other smart people. I need a sounding board. Where do I go for diversity of perspective, help and decision making? And it's that getting your ego out of the way to say, yes, I'm amazing and I can do this, but I'm smarter when I have multiple perspectives and diversity of thought around me. That's the first conversation. Where do you go? And Kimberly's serving up what I think is one of the most brilliant solutions, and that is a peer advisory group that you couldn't afford otherwise.
Yeah. Do you find that uh, how do CEOs, entrepreneurs know when they need this confidential, peer group? Are things happening within the company that are going astray where you can identify it but need to help them to see it? How does that come to be?
that's a great question. I think people think it's around the business component that, financially they're not making it, or possibly they're only scaling to the level of their competency. And that is a
Yeah.
true statement. However, I see this time and time again that the founder is struggling with just burnout and isolation. They're driven so hard by a need to prove something, prove they're worthy, prove to dad they're worth something, mom or that school teacher. So they're, I'd say just founders, anybody who has a strong drive, it's coming from a place of, I need to prove something, right? And they get to a point, and I've ran into this three times with my members where they're like, I'm so burnt out, I can't do another thing, achieve another thing. I feel empty and I've done so much. I'm growing this great business, but I'm lost, right? And so and we can talk a little bit more about that, but it's not only the loneliness, the success that is very visible, but the loneliness and isolation is not. And that's where a peer group comes in.
Yeah, AmyK, what would you say about that?
Well, I think that, one of the things that Kimberly nailed is this concept of proving. And it's how we've gotten attention, it's how we've gotten accolades, it's how we even get awards to this day. And the most successful entrepreneurs, the most successful founders are ones who stop proving and figure out that their state of being, their presence, their playful magnetic energy shifts everything, the relationship dynamics, the sales, how they go about resolving conflict and making decisions. And so it's really easy to sit here and say with buzzwords, oh, yeah, shift from proving to more playful energy and you're going to nail it. And everybody's like, oh, okay, but how? Like,
Right.
how do I start doing that? And I think that that's part of where the group dynamic comes in is we're going to take a beat, we're going to take a pause. We're going to pull you out of the day-to-day grind so that you can work on your business by working on yourself and how you want to show up first.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's they find that what has built their business is slowly breaking their life. And it comes to a point of miserable. They're just really, really depressed. How the group can help you, and thank you, Amy Kay, for touching base on this, is it gives you a support system because many of them have gone through the same journey or are still going through it. It helps bring in self-awareness. It helps bring alignment to who you really are and allowing you a space to show up with your fears, with your vulnerabilities. Where do you want to transform to? What does your purpose want to become? And they help you get there in that archetype of the group. And you've got other people that have done the journey, and you're not. Your spouse doesn't necessarily understand that. Your team doesn't really want to listen because you're the lead. And then
Yeah.
investors just want they have an agenda. So where do you go where someone holds you safe, gives you not just great answers, but more importantly, ask the right questions
Yep.
so you're solving the right problem, and that diversity of thinking I think is so powerful, and then just that overall support is just you can't find anywhere else.
No, and one of the things I find that people should know, CEOs, entrepreneurs, is the non-competitive nature
Mhm.
of Vistage. And I know the two of you were talking about this beforehand as we were getting this together. How does that work? How does that whole layout work with Vistage?
Amy, you remember, why don't you
Oh,
share?
I'm happy to share with that. So I think one of the things is when a Vistage group has a non-compete element to it, meaning that there's nobody within your same industry, it allows you to relax and to feel safe that you can say, hey, I'm struggling to figure this out, or I need help with, or what do you think about it? It's that classic Socratic, what am I missing? And so in a non-compete environment, you're safe to share what it is that you're working through. But then here's the added value that I found. When you start to hear the innovations, the secrets, the beat behind the pulse of other industries, you start to borrow from those industries. And that's kind of how you keep a competitive advantage. Because if you're just going out and you're doing what your other industry peers are doing, you're not leading. You're actually following. And so when you borrow a really great idea from another industry and you bring it back to your own, now you're ahead of the S curve. And so that to me was always really powerful of, okay, what's going on in Paul's world? What's going on in Kimberly's world that I can bring back to my world that's really cool and, as they say in the UK, innovative.
Yeah, I think uh, members feel they want to be in a environment that's the same industry because I think it validates what they're doing,
Oh yeah.
and they're not willing to be vulnerable, and you see the same patterns of solution of problems in that industry, so they're not really thinking outside the box. And like Amy Kay just mentioned, is that diversity allows for diversity of thinking, whereas that isolation sometimes distorts your judgment, right? So there's a beauty of a different break of pattern because other industries are solving their challenges differently, and you can maybe adopt that from that industry versus the same patterns you've seen time and time again within the same industry.
Kimberly, what's your role when people are coming in that meeting, non-competitive? I mean, I imagine a single toxic personality could kill that environment. So it's got to be the right people coming in there. But what is your role? I mean, you're not coaching them in that role. You're doing what exactly?
So as far as the meetings are concerned, I'm really just a facilitator. I'm there. I have a rough agenda of what we'd like to accomplish, whether it's a speaker. Members get the opportunity to host a meeting and share their business challenges, and then have the group respond about what they can improve upon, what are they doing right, helping them with what their goals are for the year. But I'm really there to facilitate the conversation, so the conversations can be helpful and help each member walk away with some practical solution or information. We spend really probably 2 to 3 hours of those meetings, what we call issue processing, where
Yeah.
everyone's required to come to the meeting with a challenge. And it could be personal. It could be, should I fire somebody? Should I hire somebody? How do I change the split that I have with my co-founder because they're not carrying their weight, right? So it just varies. I'm just really a facilitator. Now, everybody gets 2 hours of coaching with me once a month, again, confidential. And that is a different scenario because I'm actually coaching them. But I'm just there to help facilitate and keep the conversations going and make sure there's value there.
Yeah, and Amy Kay, I was going to ask you too, your experience with that, because when knowing you as well as I do, and thinking of you and a Vistage group and your expertise in conversation and communication, I'm like, did you just take that meeting over yourself, Amy Kay, because you have so much expertise, you know?
It's fun. I think I will say this sincerely because as a speaker for over 20 years for Vistage, I am really like just a value add that comes along. And there's a lot of really great speakers in Vistage. So you're exposed to incredible experts in
Yep.
a variety of fields that will help you grow and expand not only your leadership, but your business, your team, your culture, your financial acuity. I mean, they have an incredible cadre of speakers. But as a member, I will tell you that the inherent value of Vistage was in the executive issue processing session that Kimberly just referred to, because the quality of the peers at the table, the quality of your chair, a facilitator like Kimberly, that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of I have a difficult decision to make. I am trying to gather information about something to grow my business or to pivot. And so Kimberly mentioned earlier, when there are world events that are happening, such as the pandemic or geopolitical movements or financial crises, that's when Vistage becomes even more valuable because you get data that is real time. You get the ability of having access to economic forecasters that you wouldn't have access to otherwise, people who can actually help you predict and take very seminal points in history and say, this is how I'm going to stay prosperous or stable or steady through this event. And so as a member, it was so powerful to me to have access to so many bright minds that were making things positive in the world for so many people. And I think that that's something, again, that I say as a speaker, we're a bonus, but the inherent quality of the group, the inherent quality of your facilitator, it's priceless.
Yep. Yep. Well,
If I can add something too on that,
please.
AmyK, you're also not only part of the immediate group, say my group, for instance, but you're also part of the larger Vistage network, which is, international, right? And you could go to Germany and look up who's a Vistage chair or a Vistage member in Germany and meet them for lunch. I feel like in what I love about the Vistage community is um, there's a sense of integrity and success that people recognize when people decide to invest in themselves and join in Vistage that I've not seen anywhere else. And just the quality of people willing to help, oh, you're in Vistage? Oh, I'll come on over and help you, or yeah, let's meet up. Or yeah, I can refer some people to you. So there's just, I don't want to call it a sorority fraternity necessary, but there is some integrity that I love there, being a Vistage member and a chair in the entire network. I think it's over 45,000 CEOs you can be connecting with all over the world.
No, yeah, awesome. And I've got to ask you, start with you, Kimberly, because I've heard in your blogs, your content, your posts, that what got you here won't get you there. And so that's a theme. What does that mean?
Well, that comes from my own personal journey of what I like to call life character building exercises. I was a very successful executive, but I also was a workaholic. And I too got to that point where I was burned out and all I had was work and I achieved everything I wanted to. But where was I? I wasn't in a relationship. I wasn't part of my community. All I did was travel and pack and repack and unpack.
Yeah,
And I just had this realization, what else is out there, right? And
yeah,
I hit that burnout mark. So I call that Act One. We talked about it earlier about people are driven and succeeding based on this proven energy. Or I have coached some CEOs that are just afraid of ever being poor again. They remember those days they couldn't have any food, so they're literally falling asleep at lunch at their desk because they don't really allow any time for lunch, and or they're just back to back to back, even though they have the plane, trains, and automobiles, right? So it gets to a point for Act Two, which is going to get you there. So your drive and that proven energy got you here, but then now you've hit a wall that AmyK had said, and now you've got Act Two. So what does that look like? And it becomes you have to find a new way to matter. AmyK mentioned a way of being, right? Not doing, not slowing down, not doing more. It's about a new way of being, a new way to matter. And so that's what that Act Two is, which will get you there. And that's where that group helps you transform to find out what is your purpose, where you misaligned in your and how you show up at work or what you're doing, right? And where do you find meaning and purpose in your being and also in what you're doing and changing that to Act Two. Because I believe when you're following that part of it, it's easier to achieve that success. You're enjoying the journey, not just waiting to arrive. And that shift to Act Two, it can just be really a beautiful experience for people. I've seen it happen. I've coached them through it, and it just to see people so unbelievably happy and joyful and having success is just really, really a gift to be part of that process.
AmyK, how would you chime in on that?
Well, I think it's interesting. I had a phone call this morning with a CEO who is conflict avoidant. And it came out on our call that it was a survival tactic growing up in a household of 9 kids where
Ooh,
people were, constantly in conflict, right? So he learned how to be steady. And we were having this conversation, pretty tough love today, of his avoidance of conflict is coming at a cost. And if you go back to like somebody like Brene Brown that will say unclear is unkind, conflict doesn't have to be this friction point. It can be that I care too much about you to not say this. I need to be your mentor. And so we were just changing the conversation in his own head about exactly what Kimberly was saying. Like, what got you here isn't going to build the team that you need in your second act. And so
wow.
it's learning how not to be conflict avoidant. And so that's a very personal story for him about what got him to be successful, avoiding conflict, staying steady, being neutral, waving, the flag of Switzerland was not going to get him to where he needed to be going forward. And I think that's what, chair facilitators are doing all the time is saying, look, we might have to unpack your ego. We might have to do some unconditioning. And Kimberly nailed it. What got you here aren't necessarily the behaviors, the strategies, and the mindset that you need to continue to grow and evolve.
Well, so a follow-on question to that is when you talk about that, what got you here won't get you there. You both mentioned that on a personal level, personal growth, fantastic. That obviously translates into the business too, right? What got the business here is not going to get the business going, but they're connected, obviously, aren't they?
Yeah, I I personally believe that you are limited in your success to how, you know, you're limiting your success based on how much you've worked on yourself, right? Your insecurities, your the mind train that keeps going on in your head, that tape that keeps running, right? You're limited by those capabilities. So if you're not looking within and growing from that perspective, your business won't grow either. I do also have one member who has on this transformational journey of where he was living in a life of non-alignment. And even in his business, and he's literally taken a year off to kind of become aligned in his life. Personally, he's making changes in his relationships, um, and his business is thriving because he's realigning his business as well. And it's much more enjoyable for him. Work isn't just work, because its own company. It's his
Yep.
purpose, right? And it's hard to explain if you are in that mode where you're just in that proving mode, and because you haven't taken a moment yet to feel like, oh, I'm missing something here. I'm really empty, right? And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's great. And Amy Kate, your insight on that, do you run into this too a lot on your one-to-ones?
Well, I think that what's so important is that everything is changing so rapidly that we get caught up in the wrong conversation. Like we're clutching our pearls, like, oh my gosh, AI is coming, or or biotech is changing, or
Yeah.
change is constant, right? And so it's really kind of taking that beat and that pulse to step back and say, what of all these changes are going to matter most to our customers? What of all these changes are going to matter most to our supply chain and logistics? What of all these changes can we harness and then wrap our collective intelligence around it so that we can maximize the ability to grow? Not every change that's happening is helpful for your business. And so I think that's, again, part of this beat of, if I'm surrounded by 12 really bright people, or I've got 15 people in a room, and I find out what's shifting and changing in their industries and how they're using it. Like, again, let's just take AI for a second. Everybody's scared of it, or everybody's trying to figure out how to stay up. Where's the thoughtful, discerning conversation of, how do I maximize this in the best way to maximize the potential of my people, to maximize my ability to stay ahead of the curve, to take a competitive advantage out of it? What's the right investment at the right time, and how quickly can I do it so that I don't actually hurt my business in the process? These are the bigger, better, bolder questions that I think you end up asking and answering when you're surrounded by bright people.
I love it. I love it because I have these discussions too. And I often say in my industry that, everyone is racing to AI, agentic AI. I
Hmm.
need to get AI. I need to get AI, but they don't have proper hygiene on the front end,
Yeah.
right? It's like, do you understand? You got to have this over here solid, your workflows, your processes, before you start going crazy with AI, what you can plug into this. But if your hygiene is off, then this is just going to be AI illness all over your business. So I think it plays into your point there. I love it. I mean, we could go on for the next 3 hours on these topics. Both of you are so fascinating. I do want to say, for those that have gotten an opportunity to watch this, and we will simulcast this everywhere, is Kimberly, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you and get on a Zoom, do you have that process? Like, are you happy to talk to folks, and who do you want to talk to?
Primarily, everybody in my group is a founder or an entrepreneur. Not that an appointed CEO wouldn't be welcome. I do have one in the group. It's individuals that are struggling with scale, so they're looking to put processes in place. They're struggling with some of them are even raising money at this point, right? So
Yeah.
I'm really looking more for founders. I think, and entrepreneurs fit better in the group than, say, an established CEO that's making 15 million above and who's been an appointed CEO. They can certainly go to my website, performanceleadershipintl.com. There is a contact form to fill out there, and an email as well. I just ask that, if you're burnt out or you feel isolated, that's not a weakness at all. It's just a signal that there's room for you, and we'd love
Yeah.
to have you in it, right? Sincerely, it's a fun group, lots of community, lots of information sharing, as Amy Kay has mentioned, and speakers, information, resources, and most of all, growth of your business and actually yourself too.
Yeah, well, great stuff. And I'd say maybe it's up here or down here. We're simulcasting this everywhere, but the contact information and how to connect with these two incredible entrepreneurs will be around the video. Any sign-off comments? I want to thank you both for being here. Any words of wisdom as we leave?
I just love Amy Kay. She's so, yours is about conversations and you can't connect without having conversations. And my big thing is about connection. So it's such a joy to be able to collaborate with you, Amy Kay, and have
We
this
wish she
conversation.
had a bigger personality, though, right? I mean, we
I
do wish
know.
that. She's sort of like
Yes,
this
I
quiet
just
at the
wish you
back of
would
the,
not be
yeah.
so quiet over
It's
there.
Thank you
horrible.
for inviting me to participate and play in your sandbox. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you both. We'll see you soon.